C.S. Lewis's book, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. The climax of the book is when Aslan, who is clearly the stand-in for Jesus in the narrative, confronts the White Witch, and she believes that she has a claim on Edmund's life, that she has the right to kill him, and Aslan negotiates with her that she can kill him instead, and Edmund goes free, and she thinks that's a great deal. She gets to put to death her ancient enemy Aslan, so she agrees to the transaction. Edmund goes free. She executes Aslan ignominiously, and unbeknownst to her, there's a power greater than death at work, and Aslan comes back to life and then basically rips her to shreds. Okay, it always has struck me as ironic and interesting that this view of the death and resurrection of Christ presented in this children's narrative by C.S. Lewis stands in such stark contrast to the actual teaching of most evangelical churches about the nature of the atonement, right? Because most evangelical Protestant churches view the death of Christ as a transaction between Christ and the Father, in which God the Father punishes the Son for sins that the Son did not commit, which Catholics reject that view, by the way, because it makes God unjust. But C.S. Lewis here presents it as a transaction, effectively, between Christ and Satan. Turns out Lewis's view, which has been called the Christus Victor view of the atonement, name assigned by Gustav Olain, Swedish theologian, turns out to be the more ancient view. And one of the earliest theories of the atonement in the Christian tradition is the idea that by his death on the cross, Jesus defeated Satan. In some accounts, he tricked him, the way Lewis has Aslan tricking the White Witch. In others, he just defeats him. He goes to the realm of the dead and beats up on Satan. Or he beats up on death as a personification. Right? That the death and resurrection of Jesus is this direct confrontation with the powers of evil, sin and death being two of them, and that he triumphs over them by his victory on the cross. And there's this kind of language is scattered haphazardly throughout all of the New Testament. You'll find all these sort of martial metaphors in the Bible of Christ leading captives in train, and this kind of thing. And so this is a major part of the tradition. And the way it gets developed theologically, the Fathers note that 1 Peter talks about Christ preaching to the spirits that are in prison, for example, is one of many passages. The idea that by his descent to the dead, Christ sojourned among the dead and preached the gospel to the righteous dead of the Old Covenant who were waiting for the coming of the Messiah. And so there really is a victory that Christ has over the realm of the dead. It's the harrowing of hell. That's the terminology for it. And so it's both a present reality in that the power of death and sin and hell and the devil are defeated by the death and resurrection of Jesus, but also a future reality as we look forward to the culmination of these things and the return of Christ and the resurrection from the dead and the renewal of all things in glory.